This is BC Spirits, your look at the province's burgeoning distilling culture.
Welcome to another episode of BC Spirits. Of course, I'm your host, Sean Sewell. This week, I started delving into what I have in my collection, and so because it is getting a little bit more difficult to get stuff in the province, in Victoria right now because of this whole quarantine business. But I did have a couple of whiskeys, and they're a little bit of rarer whiskeys here in BC, which are smoked whiskeys. Now, I don't want to say peated, because I've only got one peated whiskey, but smoked whiskey or smoky whiskeys. I do believe that there is one out of Douglas, which is Steve Lee, out in Oliver. But of course, with his whiskeys, they literally sell out within like 2 freaking seconds. So, and I believe that it's used the same way as the Smoke Point. When we get to that, I'll explain that a little bit more. So, let's kick it off. It's going to be a short episode today. I've only got 3, which is pretty impressive, actually, that we have 3 smoky whiskeys in the province. So first up, this one I actually haven't tried yet. This is the Lohin McKinnon Peated whiskey from Central City. So, really interested in this one, mainly because I think this is a classically peated one. Obviously, from the color, it's classic Lohin McKinnon. Lohin McKinnon has a very specific flavor profile, but I'm very curious about how that flavor profile plays in with the whiskey. Actually, super subtle on the nose. I'm not a massive fan of smoky Isla whiskeys or like smoky peated whiskeys in general. Bad experience when I was a kid. I know I'm one of these people that try and push stuff, but like I just have a bad affliction with the peated whiskeys. Super subtle on the nose, but on the palate, when I start talking about smoke, I start like doing my little flavor flow chart in my head that I've talked about in the past. This reminds me of like you've had a campfire by a river and you've used river rocks, and it's that flinty, smoky campfire sort of taste. Very subtle on the palate. Quite enjoyable, actually, for a peated whiskey. Not overly peated, really subtle. Almost very... Lohin McKinnon is very much like a sort of classic Highland style or Speyside style. So like when you put peat to it, you gain a very distinct flavor matchup, which you get from a lot of these Highland and Speyside distilleries now that are playing around with peat and smoke. Super subtle nose, but that super minerality, river rock, flint, that's what's sort of coming out. It's a very clean smoke, not like barbecue fat or anything like that you get from some of these other peated whiskeys. Very clean, minimal forward, really fantastic. Actually, I think this may be my favorite Lohin McKinnon expression, which is weird because I don't like I said, I don't like peat. So this one might be one of my favorite Lohin McKinnon expressions. I'm glad that I've kept this uncracked until this episode because I absolutely love when I get surprised. Good work. Really good work. Super subtle. Next up. Now, Gord is just a crazy, eccentric dude who makes epic whiskey from our society. I love Gord and Miriam so much. I've done podcasts with them. Every time I go to Vancouver, I try and sit down with them. They just make awesome stuff, and they've always looked after me so well. So this is their maple whiskey. Now, this one's very interesting. Like, I don't think anyone else is doing this. I think I've explained this in a What I Got New this week. So I don't think anyone else is doing this. So it's distilled with maple wood smoked malted barley, and then aged in ex-maple syrup barrels. Okay, that's the easy part. So what they do, though, is they don't smoke bags and bags and bags and bags and bags of barley with maple wood. They smoke like 1 or 2 bags, and then they basically put it in the gin basket in the still for the liquid to run through it. So it's basically like a Randall, like a dry hop Randall if you're a beer geek, where you're adding more flavor to the beer as the beer runs through this sort of closed cylinder of hops. Same method here. So instead of just spending a huge amount of money on maple smoked barley, they've just done 1 or 2 bags, and then they let the distillate run through that liquid before it gets barreled, which I don't think anyone else in the world is doing this. This is a crazy experiment gone right, and of course Gord was the guy who delved into it because Gord is a freaking genius. So, man, that smoky, that Peter Lohin McKinnon, man, is just sitting on my palate really nicely. Now you would think because it's maple syrup barrels that it would be a little bit on the sweet side. On the nose, you get a couple of things. You get the classic whiskey, the classic whiskey nose from. Oh, sorry, it's not a single malt. What is it? I have to look this one up again. Sorry, no, it is a single malt. Thought so. You get the classic Odd Society single malt nose. Now, I've talked about whiskey before. I don't think we're going to have terroir specific or region specific flavor profiles a la Scotland. I think we're going to have distillery specific flavor profiles where each distillery has their very own style, which I know is in Scotland as well, but like very, very deep in that based on their whiskey, on their barley, on their grains, on their water, on their yeast, so on and so forth. On the nose, you get a little bit of the fresh wood, but again, there's a hint of like, I want to say crusty maple syrup. You know when you have maple syrup and it sits around the outside and dehydrates into a crystal? That's what I'm getting on the nose. It's a really weird flavor profile, I'm sorry. Oh. I haven't really cracked this one too much. 46%, batch number 1. I got this back at Christmas. But the balance on the palate is astounding, like beyond astounding. You get slight sweetness of maple syrup. I think the alcohol content definitely helps with that, just cuts that sweetness down really quickly before it starts creeping up on you and cloying. You're just getting the hint of barrels, which is really good because you don't want to go overboard, cleaning the barrels out and charring them again or anything like that. You kind of want to keep that maple syrup barrel as is, which can go either way because you can end up pulling a lot more wood flavor out of it. But the maple syrup is really nice. That sort of crystallized maple syrup is fantastic. The smoke, though, is this big ball of awesomeness right in the back of your palate that is just maple smoke, which is just a really subtle, beefy, woody smoke. And it just works really, really nicely. And it's just right on the back of the palate. Like, it fills up the back palate so crazy with the slight wood and maple syrup in the front. Really great experimentation gone right, which is always what I know what society is about. They love experimenting and changing things up. Oh, yeah. Whew. Cracking that more in quarantine time, that's for sure. Next up, the Shelter Point Smoke Point. Now, I know people have been losing their minds on this. I know that I think in one of the other episodes I did say they peated their barley, but they did not. This is their single malt that they actually finished in Lefroy casks. So no peat has touched the whiskey itself or the malt itself. The whiskey goes into old Lefroy casks, and Lefroy, as we know, is one of the most epic Islers ever. But you wouldn't think that much smoke would come out of a used barrel. Like, traveling time, dehydration. There's just so many things that, like, you're like, man, how much flavor are you really going to get from that barrel? And I know we talk about rum barrels and all that sort of stuff, but you really, like, when it comes to it, you might get a little bit of the barrel oak, and maybe a little bit of the whiskey flavor profile, but, like, how much smoke comes off that barrel is kind of insane. Straight away on the nose, you just get it. Again, super subtle smoke. Again, because it's not peated a la the Central City Lohin McKinnon style. This one is finished in Islay barrels. It's not until you get on the palate, my mouth has just gone and just blown up. My mouth is just salivating so hard. And this is a really good whiskey backbone to, like, really hold on to those Islay Lefroy flavors, because Islay whiskies in general are real beasts. There's some finesse to it, but they're really just smoky, peaty beasts. And to be ballsy enough to throw in a single malt made on Vancouver Island into one of the oldest Islay distilleries barrels and going, you know what, our whiskey's going to stand up to that fucker, is kind of awesome, because it really showcases the workmanship that goes into the Shelter Point whiskies. Boy, on the palate, that just goes for days. You get classic Shelter Point, and then that Lefroy just goes and just blows up your mouth. I really, really wish, I only just saw on Twitter or Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, that Steve Lee Douglas had done a whiskey similar to this. So he took his single malts and threw it into a Lefroy barrel similar to Shelter Point. So the Douglas whiskies are very, very different. We did an episode with them a couple of weeks ago. Very, very different whiskies. I would have loved to taste that. I'm still, fingers crossed, hoping that Steve Lee can get me a sample. But this is just incredible. Like, the difference in it all, from experimentation to a classic peat, which is, like, good on you, Lohin McKinnon. I know how expensive peating malt here is in BC. So good on you for, like, dropping the coin to do this. Fantastic expression. Honestly, I think it's one of my favorites. Just some super subtle, flinty. It reminds me of home. Reminds me of growing up in the country and going down by the river and swinging from the rope swing and, like, building a fire on the river rocks. Like, it just reminds me of home so bad. It's in my head. Shelter Point with their Lefroy barrel finish. Ballsy move, but good move, guys. You really did a fantastic job with this one. And of course, Gord, Mr. Experiment himself. I'm really looking forward to some of your other ones, because I know that you've got like 3 or 4 of these suckers coming out in the next little while. So I'm really looking forward to coming and tasting some of these when I'm in Vancouver next, once this is all over. But yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Central City, Odd Society, Shelter Point. Thank you so much for your support. Hope you enjoyed the episode, guys. This week is a great episode. Tomorrow is Matt Phillips from the Fermatorium Distilling Company, and of course Phillips Beer. We chat a little bit about entrepreneurship and 20 years in business, which is just an insane, incredible milestone for Phillips. Matt still is like the CEO running the joint. Like, he's still in his office every day. He's just an amazing man. So please take a listen to that. Thanks a lot for the support, guys. Have a good week. I'll see you next week. Bye.